Pardon?
I said it's 7 o'clock. I guess we should
7
get started.
o'clock?
Okay. It's 7 o'clock, so I think we should get started.
Right.
Yeah. I think everyone here knows me, but my name is Roberta Moyo, and I'm the Director of Adult Faith Formation here at St. Michael's. And I would like to welcome back those that have been with us for the Lenten Mission, and welcome those that are just joining us for the first time tonight. We are, again, very excited to have with us Father Bob Bonnot. As I said last night, he's a retired priest from the Diocese of Youngstown, and his focus, our world, our time, and our future. We've had great reflections, and we'll continue to have those great reflections tonight. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here, and thank Father Bob for all his time and preparation for this mission. So please join me in welcoming Father Bob Bonnot.
Thank you very much. Happy to be back with you. And those of you, many of you, were everybody here before? You know, I had a session on Sunday night, and then this morning. Is there anybody who was not here for either one of those? Okay, good, some people. So I had that, and I'll just give you a real quick shot of what that was about. We had 3 sessions within one program. And the 3 sessions were the past, the present, and the future. Okay, we had those different names that were used to kind of set us up. And so we had 2 breakups of the basically an hour and a half, and we'll be taking another hour and a half pretty much this evening. But yesterday and this morning, we had kind of 3 half-hour sections. But today we're only going to have 2, and so each one will be about 40 minutes probably to work through this, however it goes. And we're dealing with basically 2 documents today, 2 of the major encyclicals that Pope Francis put out. One is the Laudato Si, which is really about creation and you know, the way that the world is developing with climate and all that sort of thing. So it's a look at what God has done with that. And then the second one, that one was put out in 2015. So that's 8 years at this point. The other one was in 2017, Fratelli Tutti. And it was much longer, and it's much more substantive. I spent an hour this afternoon. Georgetown University had Cardinal Cerny. Cardinal Cerny he's a Slovenian, but he came from Canada. He's a Jesuit who was in Canada and speaks very good English and all that. He was down at Georgetown University, came in from Rome. He's the head of one of the major dicasteries in the Vatican. And so he knows Pope Francis pretty well. And there was a lot of talk today about those 2 documents, Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. So that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today. In the other sessions, we were going from the back, and we were kind of looking at the negatives of the present world, and we'll have some of that coming out. But the last session was the future. And what we're going to really be pressing today is more about our future. We need to be thinking of the future, and so that's what this is fundamentally going to talk about. And one of the things that Francis keeps saying is, we're all in this together. And it's not just all of us Catholics, but it's the whole human community. We're all in it together, and we're either going to take good care of it or we're going to have a bad development, so to speak. So basically, I'll be sharing that with you. I remind you that today is the 10th anniversary of when Bergoglio from Argentina became Pope. Kind of to his surprise, but they elected him, and there he was, okay? And he started right from the start. You know, it used to be the Pope would be elected, and he'd come out and he'd have a new garment on and he'd have all kinds of stuff on, you know. And it was very meek and a humble kind of coming there. And if many of you watched that, you know, his first evening there, you know, the new pope always had a blessing of all the people that were down in front of the basilica and all the rest of it. And he kind of said hello and all the rest of it. And then he said, "You pray for me first, then I'll bless you, because I need that prayer," you know. And he's just very humble and wants to be in there. I'll be saying some things about him, but what Georgetown had, they had that cardinal, and they had three people. One is a high-level economic guy. I worked with some of the things internationally and so forth, so he really understands what's happening with money in the world today and the teaching of the church about caring for people. What do we do with the stuff that we have? That was one. The other one was a woman who was worked with the bishops here in the United States for a spell, and now she is the head of a Jesuit program that's reaching out for a lot of the people on the margins of the world. And so they had some talk about that, because Francis is always going out to the margins. He's not looking to meet with a lot of people, the big shots, okay? So the perfect example, which I didn't remember this, but he did come here and he gave a talk down at Congress. You might remember that. And then typically after they have a big speaker like that, and this was the other popes by and large, you know, well, then they'd go off to lunch with all the big shots of the place. Well, he didn't do that because he wanted to go with the people who are on the street and people that need the care of charity there in Washington. So he has a whole different way that he has approached the way that we as Catholics function. So I'll have some things to say. I did the other day, and I may come back to some of that. So in any case, we'll have a break somewhere around the middle of this. So our Sunday night and Monday morning sessions were about our world, our time, and our future in those three segments I mentioned. It drew on the first and last books of the Bible, so we had a lot of biblical studies, and not so much studies, but reading them. And it was the book of Genesis and Revelation, which was also called the Apocalypse. And the Apocalypse especially is a difficult book to read. And it's got the very negative, but also the very positive. So we went through that. This session aims to look more deeply and carefully into our future by giving attention to two major encyclicals written by Pope Francis. We will have only the one break, as I've mentioned, kind of after we go through the first one, Laudato Si, and then the second. A close aide of Pope Francis published an interview with him recently. He sees Francis as having a very strong pastoral approach. So he's not there so much to be an administrator, you know? And he was never a great, he was a good scholar, but he was never like a high-level teacher and thinker. He's a down-to-earth person who shares his faith and trying to share it with others. His close aide said that after 10 years, the pontiff has propelled Catholicism into a more open conversation with the world, eliciting criticism, but also distinguishing himself as a global moral authority, because he's always moving around the world and he's speaking his mind. Pope Francis reaches out to everybody and always welcomes them to be part of our one world. And he does that for the world now. It's not about the past, you know, but it's how it is now and then kind of moving toward the future. Pope Francis reaches out to everybody and always welcomes them to be part of our one world now. Sort of like Jesus at the well with the woman, who welcomed all the other people that he went down. He spent a couple days with them down in their town when they came out and checked him out at the well. Francis is a down-to-earth pastor who invites us all to share our thoughts and to collaborate with the rest of humanity toward a better future for us and the whole human race. So he's including everybody in his way of thinking of things. He understands what it means to live the gospel and has prompted widespread debate and discussion, and he allows that and listens closely himself to what the chatter is that's going on. This Pope is the first to select as his namesake the patron saint of ecology, St. Francis of Assisi. Ecology is the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. And that's what I had to ask myself, what's ecology? You know, when I started to read that, you folks probably all know that better. That means us and the rest of nature, that we are in relationship with all the other creatures that are around, in a sense. So ponder yourself whether Francis is developing a better future than where we are at this point. He has planted many seeds and grown good fruit over these 10 years. His themes of Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, those two documents, are helping the church feel like it is participating in the effort that the world is making to be more human. And that was a big element of this conversation they had at Georgetown today. The world needs to get to be more human with the other of humanity. Francis has emphasized concern for creation and made ecology a central theme of his papacy. His predecessor, Benedict XVI, was tagged to be a green pope, and Francis is so considered now also. So it reaches back to before the turning of the century. It was kind of Francis before he was pope, when Pope John Paul II was the first one there, but he got interested in what was happening to creation, to what was happening in the world. Francis is a realist, but also a dreamer. And as I mentioned in the other session, he has invited us to dream and share our dreams. The synodal process, the walking together, and that was mentioned 15 times, if anything, at Georgetown today, synod, walking with one another, talking with one another, sharing, listening to one another. So the synodal process is one place that Francis is inviting us to share our dreams with one another, and to listen to those dreams and kind of see, well, what does that say then to me? It's one thing to have dreams and think about them ourselves. It's something else to see it through the vision and dreams God is currently provoking in us through these encyclicals and much more. So these documents, if you haven't read them, I encourage you to try to do that. You can buy them as booklets. You can write to the Bishops' Conference in Washington and get them. Or all you have to do is to go to the Vatican VA, okay? Get the Vatican webinar, and you can just, get the book, get these pastorals, these things kind of reduced, put into your computer. It's right there. It doesn't cost you a penny. Don't have to pay for it. You send enough for the conference, for the bishops and for the parish. So you owe something that's free. So first came Laudato Si in 2015. Immediately, a young Swedish girl, most of you probably know this, Greta Thunberg. She got the message of what was happening to our climate and our environment when she was 15. She never talked until she was 6 years old. So she was a strange kind of little girl. But when she was 15, she started to raise the message herself, and she became a global champion of Laudato Si's message. She's 20 now. She keeps trying to bring us all together on this one special planet, our home. Once we start to act, she has said, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. And she's an actionist. She actually had the opportunity to talk at the United Nations. And she's famous, because she saw what was happening to our environment, to our climate. and she was living up in Sweden. Later, we will touch on its chapters on dark clouds over Fratelli Tutti. Fratelli Tutti was published then in 2017, so a little bit later, but it's a longer document. Later, we will touch on its chapters on dark clouds over a closed world. That's the first chapter, and the necessity of an open world with open hearts. This is Pope Francis' way of working things. It's packed with precious insight and advice as we look forward, more than we can cover tonight. I'll do my best to share with some of its richness, but I won't debate some of the things that are there, okay? And I like to make a little joke out of one of the chapters is, we need a better kind of politics. Well, I don't want to get into politics, so I'm not going to start to talk about the politics, okay? I know that happens an awful lot. So, in the 1200s, St. Francis of Assisi wrote a poem titled Laudato Si, Blessed be to you, my Lord. It started with his love of God, nature, poems, singing, and gathering brothers and sisters to be down to earth in community with one another. He died on October 3rd, 2026, St. Francis of Assisi. And we celebrate him every year for what he started on that date, October 3rd, every fall. There is now an annual season of creation celebrating among most Christian religions from September 1 to October 3. It's a season of creation. Now, I don't know if that's part of what you're doing here, talking about it, raising it, but it happens every year. So I encourage you to keep those two dates in mind and to get into it. But beyond that, we have the 53rd International Earth Day, 53 years ago. So now take 2023 and cancel 53 from that. So it's back in 1970 that people were already saying, we have to take better care of Mother Earth. And so every year we have this Earth Day to really pay attention to it. From May 21 to 28, there is a Laudato Si week run by the Laudato Si movement that's based in Rome. Pope Francis is in many ways like St. Francis. He chose Francis as his papal name and chose to live and serve simply in a modest Vatican hotel rather than in a palace court where the popes usually were living for a long, long time. So he could be with other people where they were in this hotel, and they'd all go down and have breakfast together. He loves doing that. And he has a mass right there in that hotel, so people can come to the morning mass with him. And he loves to talk with people. And he travels around humbly in Rome in a mini car, rather than a big Mercedes-Benz, which has always been available to the Pope, a big place. St. Francis always walked. And Francis likes to do that, but now he's, he has a bad knee and he doesn't want to have surgery again. So, the Laudato Si encyclical consists of 6 chapters with these titles. Just the titles tell us a lot. The first one is, what's happening to our common home? That term, common home, always means our earth, our place that we live. This is our home. Second chapter, the gospel of creation. How do we theologically, as it were, but kind of in our spiritual life, how do we see creation? Third chapter is the human roots of the ecology crisis. So what's happening to our environment and our climate? It's a crisis, and we're a part of it. It's coming up from what we're doing with the roots of Mother Earth. Fourth one is integral ecology. Fifth is lines of approach and action. Back to Greta. Action. We have to do something. We can't just sit there and watch it and say, and then the last one is ecological education, to try to grow in knowing what's happening, and spirituality. because caring for Mother Earth is a part of our spiritual life. So for this encyclical, I'm just going to read a little paragraph about each of those chapters. When we get to Fratelli Tutti, I'll just be working with just a couple of them. First, what is happening to our common home? Now, these are things that are in the chapter. To put it briefly, what is happening is this: gas and coal pollution, plastic, climate change, polluted water, loss of biodiversity, decline in the quality of human life and the breakdown of society, global inequality. Recent reports affirm that the average years of life here in the United States are down from the past. We're dying younger than we used to be doing. Also, our birth rate is now below 2. Okay, so we're losing the quantity of our people. We have a lot of people coming in that offsets that, but in terms of the citizens, if you want, women are basically having less than 2 children. Without welcoming immigrants, our population would be declining dramatically, as is happening in China, much to their concern. So they're down nearly 1 million, and that just came out maybe 2 months ago. So their population was shooting for the top. Well, they're going down. India is going to the top. That has consequences as generations unfold. So this is what's happening to our common home. Something's happening to our Mother Earth and what's happening in our life here. Second chapter, the gospel of creation. This chapter invites us to absorb this special gospel reflection in the way it aims to lift up faith as the source of light, wisdom, and hope in today's world. Various biblical accounts from Genesis to Revelation, which we talked about yesterday and this morning, provide wisdom for our consideration from writers, poets, prophets, apostles, and gospel writers. It draws our attention to the mystery of the universe, which we are only recently exploring way out there. Thanks to the James Webb Space Telescope, we're seeing so much more than we were just 2 years ago before this space telescope came out. Each of the many creatures on our planet have a particular message as part of creation's harmony, from dog to cat to elephant. The animals are part of this whole work of God. We humans are part of a universal communion, and there is a destination for all the goods. Jesus is a part of this. It's Christ's body in which we all exist. Creation is a way that God communicates with us. The universe, God within or God without. God within everywhere wins. So you can think spiritually, theologically, in terms of this creation. Third chapter, the human roots of the ecological crisis. This chapter invites our attention to the creativity and power of modern technology. It is helping us to see and understand globalization and how we are all part of the same ecological crisis worldwide, though we tend to think it's just in special places. So, for example, the people out in Utah, the only real crisis is that the Salt Lake is drying up. Well, that's affecting the whole planet. We all live in a place that isn't so bad, but the global ecological crisis is having a deep impact on the nature of us humans. We are significantly part of forces making big changes on the world in which we live. Not just in our little part, but all over the world. Okay? I mean, the stuff that's blowing into California, all that snow, it's coming from another part of the world. And it comes in and hits us. So We are significantly part of those forces, not just in our little part, but all over the world. Most of us used to live on the ground, plowing the dirt. Now most of us live off the ground in one way or another, on concrete, or wood, or linoleum, or in a car, etc. We don't have our feet on the ground. Hey, that's deeper down. That's dirt, you know. No, that's what we were developed out of. Many people now don't even know where and how milk and foods come from, especially children. Where's the milk come? Down at the grocery store. You know, it's a whole different way of understanding. Food is just something down the street in the grocery store. So this is a part of our human roots. Chapter 4 is the integral ecology. This chapter calls us to make our ecology more integrated and effective on many fronts: economic, social, and cultural patterns of daily life. An example is spewing gas fumes into our air when we unnecessarily go driving around. Every time we do that, we're pumping out all this gas, I guess, of some sort, into what we're breathing. You know, and we're trying to cut that down happily, but it still is not good. The principles of the common good, not just our modest community, but the common good of our whole human family, call us to be conscious of all of our brothers and sisters. And whatever we're contributing to what's happening to the climate, again, it's not just our cars, it's our factories and all that sort of thing, and it floats all around the world. So it touches all kinds of other people who don't have big factories, but the smoke gets there. What we are doing here with our habits are having huge impacts on people in other parts of our world. What some of the things nations in our world are doing explain the weather storms that are generating huge winter storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, etc., which have frequent negative impact on the central part of our country too. I think often of, if you go down to Louisiana, okay, and then they have all those gas things that generate all the gas that's down by the Gulf, and it goes all the way over to Texas, and where do the fumes go to? They just float across to the east, okay, and then goes all the way around the world. Think California recently and Kentucky in the last year or two. You might remember when the news, these terrible storms come through these states and just wipe out a lot of people. Lots of people live there and in other parts of the world. Think California and Kentucky in the last couple of years, devastating hurricanes and storms. Justice between generations is important. We need to care for our children and grandchildren, not to mention bees that fertilize flowers, that grow into oranges or apples or corn. And the environment is starting to kill off a lot of bees. And that begins to have an impact on the food that we grow. Scientists and animal doctors are finding more and more fish and birds becoming filled with plastic because of all the plastic bags we use and throw away. From even whales are being washed up on shores dead, full of throwaway plastic bags. Little birds too, and this was just in the news maybe 2 days ago, are getting plastiqued, full of plastic, little birds, because they're always chipping stuff, and this stuff is all around. And they start, boop, 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 little pieces, and they're going into them. We're probably not attentive to the reality that we too, in different ways, are probably taking a lot more plastic than we think we are into us. The amount of meat we are raising and eating is another instance. We're destroying large swaths of the Amazon forest, for example, so we can have more McDonald's and other hamburgers at low cost. So we'll cut down the trees, so we get more cattle can meander around about that. And they're taking all the indigenous people there and killing them or driving them back into the woods and so forth. More meat, less oxygen is the result. because the more we cut down the trees, the less oxygen is being given off into our climate. Some bishops of England, Catholic bishops, embraced and encouraged meat abstinence on Fridays as a way to do some spiritual adjusting to help overcome the negative environmental impact of meat production and its harm to creation. So 250,000 or more Catholics did that. They kind of went back to not eating meat just on Fridays, you know. And a Cambridge University study found that the meatless Fridays in the United Kingdom resulted in a reduction of 55,000 tons of carbon annually. And I'm sure you've all picked up about that. A part of the problem is all the carbon that's in the atmosphere now. And those 55,000 tons are the equivalent of 82,000 fewer people flying round trip from London to New York, okay? And that's where a lot of the airplanes, and that's a big contributor too to this carbon problem. The study's authors said that if Catholics in the US adopted a year-round meatless Fridays, the reduction in carbon emission would be as much as 20 times greater. That's a good option, okay? Some people are starting to do that, eating less meat, more vegetables. So here in the United States, there is a movement for people to do something of the sort, even to the point of changing their diets to more vegetables and less meat. For many, that's hard to accept, but it makes a good difference. Vegetarian meals are becoming more popular. And once we know how to grow and cook our vegetables so they are more than colorful decorations or side dishes on our meat-laden platters, okay? And I think you'll find in stores there's a lot of vegetarian, okay, kind of food that's right there. It's available for us. And a lot of people are saying, I'll go to that. I know a lot of people don't eat any meat at all. I eat it if it's there, you know, but a lot of people, you know, don't. So, Chapter 5, Lines of Approach and Action. Pope Francis' encyclical, together with thousands of reports of scientists, are calling for action as Greta Thunberg proposed. She's now that young woman I mentioned earlier, and she's calling for action at the UN level and has been doing that for many years now. Back in the 1960s or so, awareness of the growing problem began to emerge. Many people dismissed it. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, it was just the beginning of hunch in our own American community as a whole. They had a hunch that something's happening, you know. And in the 70s, it started to get more aware, but there was a lot, oh, no, that's not coming around, you know. Companies were, they had the studies, but they didn't put them out, okay? You know, so this growing problem began to emerge, and you'd see it more and more in the magazines that go back to that time. And many people dismissed it, but many scientists began to see what was happening. But the enterprises making lots of money, as I said, buried their reports. Now they've been uncovered, and they admit it. Okay, they've been pumping a lot of stuff out that's not very good. We're catching on little by little, but are seeing that we need to act more quickly. So in our own country, you know, we have all these standards, and now they're trying to reduce the pollution by 2030. You know, maybe it's going to take us until 2050, you know, and kind of lower the temperature of what's happening in the world in which we live. All of that, you know, we are addressing it, but it's still a far distance that we have to go. Over the past 50 or 60 years, we gradually started to see the scope of the problem. And we have begun to change from the kind of cars we buy and drive to the way we get our electricity, from sun or wind or from oil and coal, etc. So, you know, it kind of stunned me when I first heard that Ford is turning all of their vehicles within, I forget what the time frame, but they're all going to be run on electric, not on gas. I don't know if you follow that. I don't follow it that close, but it keeps hitting me. We are realizing then that we need to do better. The Laudato Si movement that emerged from Pope Francis' encyclical is a global effort of mostly middle-aged and young people working together. Now, I suspect most of Roberta's probably the exception, okay? And a few younger folks here that still have a lot of hair and black hair, okay? You know, but we need to be part of it too. But the young people, they've bought into it. They see it. They know it, okay? And so they are really doing this. Laudato Si movement is a global one that emerged from Pope Francis' encyclical, and young people, they've formed a universal effort that they're doing, and there are a lot of them doing it here in the U.S. If you are keeping your eyes open, you can't miss what our climate crisis needs. But we can't close our eyes, too. There are all sorts of groups now working on this, such as the Catholic Community Covenant, that is based in Washington, Citizens Climate Lobby, the Sierra Club, and on it goes. Lots of people get it. And they said, I better do something. You know, it's going to be bad for our grandkids, etc. So our Creator has entrusted this planet to us. God is not going to wave a magic wand and say, oh, well, I wanted to give you a hard time, but I'll just swipe it away. No, you know, it's not going to work that way. So the last chapter in the Laudato Si is an ecological education and spirituality. It all fits together. For all of us who believe in the Creator of the spectacular universe in which we live, and who can see how uniquely special is our planet, as I mentioned in the other talks here, you know, we're looking out there in space and we think, oh, there's got to be more life someplace. I mean, we got all these things floating around out there. But we don't have any firm evidence that there's any life anywhere else. And we think there's water out there, but I'm not sure they've really found it that we can prove it, okay? So God deserves our thanks and our readiness to be responsible. We've learned a lot as we have moved along through the several 100,000 years we humans have been developing. My understanding is it's about 400,000 years ago that the human community really started, our ancestors, we became human beings 400,000 years ago. You can check and see how some of that goes. But what our behavior has been doing to Mother Earth over the last 200 years, the industrial era especially, there is much more to learn and to clean up if Mother Earth is going to continue being our healthy common home. We're getting better, but remain long from being well, Mother Earth. So that's a brief summary of Laudato Si. I hope you will read the encyclical or books based on it as part of your Lenten focus, if you haven't already done that. Integrate something good for our climate into your habits. For example, use less gas when you drive your car or when you use electricity. Be attentive of the chemicals you use on your grass, etc. It can do good things, but it can provoke long-distance damage. Sacrifice and gift giving. Having heard the climate crisis siren now over many years, and pondering a bit on the pastoral letter of Francis regarding our common home, know that nearly all scientists all over the world, with vast collaboration, input, and conclusions, are not kidding around. Okay? Used to be, low level of some scientists that were poking their nose into that. But it kept growing, and more and more and more of the scientists that are honest, okay, and they really put it out there, they're not kidding around. They think there's serious stuff that is still developing. Many business, political, and economic people understand and are increasingly changing their course in order to heal Mother Earth. They know they've messed it up, poisoned it in various places. Think electric cars versus gas guzzlers of yore. I mean, you probably remember when you were behind somebody, you heard a lot of noise and a lot of smoke. But you don't see that much anymore because we have taken steps forward. Even pickup and heavy freight trailers are going to go electric. I mean, those huge trucks. How we generate our electricity remains a challenge. Coal, gas, or solar, and batteries, and wind. You know, some debate about that. Oh, we shouldn't put those big things circling around out in the lakes. You know, it's not pretty. Might kill a bird, you know. But we have to find how can we do it that's going to be less damaging. How we generate our electricity remains a challenge. These are complex realities we have to take seriously, applying our faith and trust in God and our hope for the future of our brothers and sisters, the people that we love. What each of us decide and tries to contribute to has impact on lots of people, for better or worse. So I'm going to stop there with Laudato Si, and we'll be moving on in a bit to Fratelli Tutti. We'll have a little break here. So we're at 7:40 at this point. So I have a few more things to say here. The Fratelli Tutti encyclical calls us to come together as one family, sisters and brothers all. We must face the realities of the world we live in today, and the environment is a part of that. There is much good, but there is also much threatening, starting with the 90-second clock that could sound the destructive nuclear Big Bang on our planet that would destroy nearly everything in our 400,000 or so years of development. Surely we want to survive and to become fratelli, male and female siblings in God's one holy family, loving family, rather than none. There are dark clouds over us, and we will consider next, what Fratelli Tutti contributes. But I'm going to close with a prayer. Father, we praise you with all your creatures. They came forth from your all-powerful hand. They are yours, filled with your presence and your tender love. Praise be to you, Son of God, Jesus. Through you all things were made. You were formed in the womb of Mary, our mother. You became part of this earth. You gazed upon this world with human eyes. Today you are alive in every creature in your risen glory. Praise be to you, Holy Spirit. By your light, you guide this world toward the Father's love and accompany creation as it groans in travail. You also dwell in our hearts, and you inspire us to do what is good. Praise be to you, triune Lord, wondrous community of infinite love. Teach us to contemplate you in the beauty of the universe, for all things speak of you. Awaken our praise and thankfulness for every being that you have made. Give us the grace to feel profoundly joined to everything that is. God of love, show us our place in this world as channels of your love for all the creatures of this earth, for not one of them is forgotten in your sight. Enlighten those who possess power and money, that they may avoid the sin of indifference, that they may love the common good, advance the weak, and care for this world in which we live. The poor in the earth are crying out, O Lord, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. Praise be to you, loving God. Amen. So I suggest that if you want to stand and stretch a little bit now, as you stand, if somebody has something you want to say, a question, a comment that you'd like to contribute, I want to try to keep this as closely as I can into that 90-minute segment, but we might run over a bit. So, if you need to stand up, I do, please do. And she has a microphone, so don't be afraid to say something. Good. Here we go.
I really appreciated when you shared what the church in England are doing regarding Fridays. And what I appreciated was the effect. There was a study, and it said what the impact was. I think so often this looks so huge and so big, and you think, what can I do?
Yes.
How will that really impact it?
Yeah.
And perhaps we need more studies like that.
Uh-huh.
So that people can see, yes, this can make a difference.
Yeah. And encourage it, to share the idea. There's a friend of mine who lives out in Kansas City, and he just was a big eater and ate everything that was going on until he was 39. And something got to him. I think it was at a retreat or something that he was at, and he decided, I'm going to stop eating meat. And he's now 82 or something like that, and he's healthy. He's 83. He walks miles every day. He does push-ups every day. I mean, because when you're just a vegetarian, that's healthy food, And the meat, I suppose, has great pluses there too. I'm not all tuned into that. Anybody else? Thank you for that contribution. Okay? Well, if you're ready, we'll move on. And usually in this, what I have done is I've had a kind of conclusion of a segment with praying 5 Hail Marys, but I want to respect your time and not have this extended too much. So let me just take a quick look at what I've got here. So that was about 4 pages. This will be another 4 pages. But I'll try to move through them quickly so we can have more conversation. So we're going to move on then to Fratelli Tutti. And this is a papal teaching that had a later start from Pope Francis, as I mentioned, and a different focus than Laudato Si did. It has 8 chapters that I'm going to read off very quickly because it gives you a sense of what's in this encyclical. Number 1 was the dark clouds over a closed world. We spent a good deal of time with that in the earlier session. Second was the stranger on the road. And the stranger on the road is the Samaritan man, who was walking up the road to Jerusalem, and he saw this guy who was in the gutter because somebody beat him up and robbed him. And you'll hear more about that, the stranger on the road. And of course, we had the woman at the well, who was also a Samaritan, same kind of dynamic that those 2 gospel passages speak. Chapter 3 is envisioning and engendering or developing an open world, a different kind of world. We're not closed in, against other things, but we're trying to link with others. A heart open to the whole world. Our hearts open to the whole world, not just my world. Whole depth of that. Chapter 5 is a better kind of politics. And Francis he's not a big politician, but he speaks up and addresses what he sees happening. And, we're all in politics in one way or another. So, we need to undertake it and do it as well as we can. Chapter 6 is dialogue and friendship. And he's very assertive about dialogue. We need to talk to one another, and develop friendships, even though we see things differently. Can't turn it into, I'm right, you're wrong, let's fight. No, we're brothers and sisters. Then it goes to, that was chapter 6, Dialogue and Friendship. Chapter 7 is Paths of Renewed Encounter. That sometimes we don't want to run into people that we don't know, or we don't like where they're coming from, or they're needy. And, we need to open ourselves to more people. And then the paths of those renewed encounters. And then chapter 8 is about various religions all the religions of the world coming together to collaborate at the service of fraternity and sorority in our world, that we're all in this together. Okay? They don't have to be like us, but they're brothers and sisters. So how can we share and come to know one another and appreciate one another? So the title of this the document is Fratelli, which of course is about the frater, the brother, the man, okay? But it includes women. It intends to include women, that it's not just about the men. So you can put fraternities and sororities together. And I looked it up. I looked up, well, what exactly does Fratelli include? And when I looked it up on the internet, Fratelli means pizza shops. Okay, that's what a Fratelli is to us. It's a pizza shop, and they listed all kinds of them, that are that. Okay, so very quickly, the dark clouds over a closed world. We covered some of the encyclical on our first session, but we can get a deeper sense of what it offers tonight. It's a modest contribution for continued reflection in the hope that in the face of present-day attempts to eliminate or ignore other people, we may prove capable of responding with a new vision of fraternity and social friendship beyond mere words. We link up with more people. By acknowledging the dignity of each human person, we can contribute to the rebirth of a universal aspiration to fraternity between all men and women. Here, and this is a quote, we have a splendid secret that shows us how to dream and to turn our life into a wonderful adventure. For decades, it seemed that the world had learned a lesson from its many wars and disasters and was slowly moving toward various forms of integration. So think after the Second World War, formation of the United Nations, etc. The dream of a united Europe, for example, growing desire for integration in Latin America as another, for instance. So Central America and South America, they've really linked themselves together in many ways. And that's where Pope Francis came from. And so he pumps for that, that we need to have that kind of world. Our own days, however, seem to be showing, and this is a citation from the document, however, our own days seem to be showing signs of a certain regression. Francis sees a growing loss of the sense of history, which leads to further breakdown. There is no plan for everyone. We are in a throwaway world with inadequate commitments to universal human rights. Universal. So there is conflict and much fear. So we might think Russia versus NATO, Ukraine versus Russia, or Russia, against Ukraine, Taiwan versus China, afraid. We have lots of wars in other places. Do we see ourselves as a single family dwelling in a common home and so caring for our world? Do we respect and support the United Nations that we finally got up and were running after World War II? Okay, and I remember when that started, and the Vatican was one of the first to get into the United Nations, and persistently continues to be active with regard to it. But I know a number of people who disdain the United Nations, disdain it. We lack a common roadmap in our globalization and the progress we think we are making. Francis wrote this directly. In today's world, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading. We have our own tribe. They're not in our tribe. And the dream of working together for justice and peace seems an outdated utopia. This is pretty sober talk. What reigns instead is a cool, comfortable, and globalized indifference, born of deep disillusionment, concealed behind a deceptive illusion, thinking that we are all powerful while failing to realize that we are all in the same boat. Francis likes to say that. This illusion, unmindful of the great fraternal values, leads to a sort of cynicism that is the temptation we face. And I think, I don't know what you think, but that runs through our country. Cynical. Francis writes about our recent pandemics and calamities. They brought us together. But will we think no longer in terms of them and those, but now only us? Us? The rest of them is not our concern. Is human dignity absent at the borders? Is our communication with others respectful, or do we keep others distant? There's a lot of that going on, not just in our country, but around the world in different places. In fact, at this conference down in Georgetown I was listening to today, it kind of stunned me because I've seen that the document of how many people in the world today they're just migrants because they can't live where they came from, and they just have to keep moving around to try to find a place to live. It's not, and I thought it was 70,000. It's over 100,000 now. When what happened in Ukraine, 14 million people in Ukraine got out of that country and had to go someplace else. So it's over 100,000. We face a social dilemma. Today's world is largely, Francis writes, a deaf world. A deaf world, because we don't listen. We destroy the self-esteem of others. We always insist we have the last word. Francis invites everyone to renewed hope, for hope speaks to us of something deeply rooted in every human heart. Hope speaks to us of a thirst, an aspiration, a longing for a life of fulfillment, a desire to achieve great things, things that fill our heart and lift our spirit to lofty realities like truth, goodness, and beauty and justice. We might go back to the woman at the well. She was thirsty. She was thirsty. Jesus was thirsty. In Fratelli Tutti, Francis tells the story of the other Samaritan stranger, a man on the road to Jerusalem, which I mentioned earlier, who helped a beat-up man on the wayside. Jesus' parable was a response to a question. Am I my brother's keeper? That goes back to Cain and Abel. The significance of this parable of the Good Samaritan is that love does not care if a brother or sister in need comes from one place or another, one tribe or another, one race or another, one language or another. Love shatters the chains that keep us isolated and separate. In their place, love builds bridges. Love enables compassion and dignity. That's what we need in our future world. If we want the future to be better than perhaps we feel it's like today. So chapter 2 is a whole write-up about this stranger on the road, which was part of the Gospels. And Jesus' parable summons us to rediscover our vocation as citizens of our respective nations and of the entire world, builders of a new social bond. This summons is ever new, yet it is grounded in a fundamental law of our being. We are called to direct society to the pursuit of the common good, and with this purpose in mind, to persevere in consolidating its political and social order, its fabric of relations, its human goals. Top priority. What are we doing with humans? By his actions, the Good Samaritan showed that the existence of each and every individual is deeply tied to that of others. Life is not simply time that passes. Life is a time for interactions of ourselves with other people. The parable eloquently presents the basic decision we need to make in order to rebuild our wounded world. The complaint that we often hear, oh, everything's broken, nothing works, it can't be fixed. What can I do? This feeds into disillusionment and despair and hardly encourages a spirit of solidarity and generosity. Plunging people into despair closes a perfectly perverse circle. The Samaritan woman on the road became a neighbor to the wounded Judean in the gutter. By approaching and making himself present, he crossed all cultural and historical barriers. Jesus concludes the parable by saying, "Go and do likewise." In other words, he challenges us to put aside all differences and, in the face of suffering, to draw near to others with no questions asked. Chapter 3 is envisioning and engendering an open world. So the encyclical talks about our love for others, for who they are, moves to seek the best for their lives, social friendship that excludes no one, and a fraternity that is open to all. Racism is a virus that quickly mutates, and instead of disappearing, grows into hiding and lurks in waiting. All we all know, is that it's still very much around. But we have made great progress. I'm at least very impressed with that. And the thing that has really hit me in the face, and I'm not saying that I'm the best of the ones that do that, all you have to do is watch television. And you see loads and loads of black people and Asian people and white people, men and women, and they're all working together. And I take that as they're telling us that's what has to happen in our population. So let me see if I can get back to where I am here, okay? So we're envisaging, a better world. This racism has to be done. So then it goes on, a love capable of transcending borders is the basis of what in every city and country can be called social friendship. Social friendship. That means genuine social friendship within a society makes true universal openness possible. We're happy to meet with anybody. Francis is like that, He loves living in that hotel because he can meet all these different people that are in and out and coming around. And he just loves to go out and meet with people and has a ball with it. The man on the roadside, bruised and abandoned, was a distraction to others on the road, headed for themselves in a different direction, an interruption for all that. They just went along to the left side, In any event, that man was hardly important. He was a nobody, undistinguished, irrelevant to their plans for the future. But the Good Samaritan transcended these narrow classifications. He himself did not fit into any of those categories. He was simply a foreigner without a place in Jerusalem's society, free of every label and position. He was able to interrupt his journey, change his plans, and unexpectedly come to the aid of an injured person who needed his help. And he took him to the inn by himself and paid for his presence there. And he said, "I'll be back." And he was. What we need, in fact, are states and civil institutions that are primarily concerned with individuals and the common good. A truly human and fraternal society will be capable of ensuring that each of its members is accompanied at every stage of life in an efficient and stable way, not only by providing for their basic needs, but enabling them to give the best of themselves, even though their performance may be less than optimum, their pace slow, or the efficiency limited. Social friendship and universal fraternity necessarily call for an acknowledgement of the worth of every human person, always and everywhere. It's interesting that was brought up in this conference this afternoon of this. He really knows his stuff. He's written a lot of books on the economy, economics, and all that. He's worked internationally, and I think with the UN. And one of the things he there was saying, this is basic. And all the things that people might own and all the money that's out there, it has to be spread out so everybody, their worth is recognized. In Latin, the word benevolencia, which is used in the encyclical, references an attitude that wills the good of others. It bespeaks a yearning for goodness, an inclination toward all that is fine and excellent, a desire to fill the lives of others with what is beautiful, sublime, and edifying. Solidarity finds concrete expression in service, which can take a variety of forms in an effort to care for others. And I want to just say, I had a wonderful talk with a sister, and I forget what her name is, sister who is on your staff here for social justice. Yes. She just shared the whole thing, that we need to help, because there are many people in Canton live in poor homes, don't get much respect. They need to have what this just talked about. We have to be benevolent. It's not charity. They deserve it because they're part of the human family. And then it has a section on property, the importance of that, and this economist also talked about that. Pope St. John Paul said this, St. John Paul II, God gave the earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all its members, without excluding or favoring anyone. The right to private property can only be considered a secondary natural right, derived from the principle of the universal destination of created goods. And they said a lot about that this afternoon. So, moving on here, chapter 4 is a heart open to the whole world, and I'm going to go quickly through that and then jump forward so we can have some more time toward the end for a conversation. Chapter 4 is about our heart, open to the whole world. This chapter accents that all human beings are brothers and sisters. It writes about borders and their limit, a constant issue about our borders. Our proper response to the arrival of migrating persons can be summarized in 4 words: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate. Good standards. It is not a case of implementing welfare programs from the top down, but rather of undertaking a journey together through these 4 actions in order to build cities and countries that, while preserving their respective cultural and religious identity, are open to differences and know how to promote them in the spirit of human fraternity. That conference that I saw today, it will be available, and there was a woman who was from Christigan, one of those places in Russia and the little countries around. I forget exactly what the name of it was. She moved into Russia, and then she was working for the laborers, and she had a hard problem. She wound up going to Notre Dame, and she got her a couple of degrees, a very bright woman. And so she is part of Catholic Relief Services to help people live what this just talked about. And it was very moving to hear her talk. It's crucial to establish in our societies the concept of full citizenship and to reject the discriminatory use of the term minorities, which engenders feelings of isolation and inferiority. Its misuse paves the way for hostility and discord. It undoes any success and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against. We need to communicate with each other to discover the gifts of each person, to promote that which unites us, and to regard our differences as an opportunity to grow in mutual respect. The true worth of the different countries of our world is measured by their ability to think not simply as a country, but also as part of the larger human family. So I'm going to move toward conclusion here now, and I invite you to start thinking with this. Francis writes, "Let us realize that as our minds and hearts narrow, the less capable we become of understanding the world around us." That's a very interesting statement. Okay? When we close in our minds and hearts, we become less capable of understanding the world in which we live. Without encountering and relating to differences, it's hard to achieve a clear and complete understanding even of ourselves and of our native land. Other cultures are not enemies from which we need to protect ourselves, but different reflections of the inexhaustible richness of human life. This woman today, as an example, she's a Muslim, by the way. That's where she's from, but she's working for Catholic Relief Services because she knows how to get to those people and deal with them. Seeing ourselves from the perspective of another, of one who is different, we can better recognize our own unique features and those of our culture, its richness, its possibilities, and its limitations. In some areas of our city, there is still a lively sense of neighborhood, and I think that's true in this area. This is true of our healthy parishes. Each person quite spontaneously perceives a duty to accompany and help his or her neighbor. Makes a difference, Oh, we don't want to be near them. We don't want to see them walking around. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that's here, but that's a problem. So finally, Francis writes about the importance of dialogue and friendship in our society, rather than anger and hatred. And there's a lot of that floating around. I think we all know that. Approaching, speaking, listening, looking at, coming to know and understand one another and to find common ground, all these things are summed up in the one word, dialogue. Talk with other people. Persistent and courageous dialogue does not make headlines, but quietly helps the world to live much better than we imagine. Francis writes further about social dialogue for building together a new culture, and also about the basis of consensus and truth if a new culture is indeed to be near and one we encounter. Such encounters develop cultures and bring the joy of acknowledging and knowing others. So that's just a touch of this very rich document that he wrote, Fratelli Tutti. The Word of God, as we know, is always speaking to us. The Spirit is always inspiring us. Jesus is always pouring himself into our hearts and lives. This is my body. This is my blood. It's for you. Just like Jesus at the well, sharing with others the best of water. The dream Pope Francis references and the encouragement he gives is for our own dreaming as we are baptized into Christ and called by Christ to follow him. Much is happening in today's world and in today's church. Our future is not thoroughly predictable, but Christ is always with us, leading us into that future. It surely will bring many crosses to carry, but it will also lead to the fullness of life that comes with the living water, which we have been thinking about this week because we just heard it all proclaimed at Mass yesterday. That water, the Spirit given to us and the leadership of Jesus, is always available to resurrect us when we feel our world is empty. So that leaves us, I think, with a fair amount of time just to have conversation, and I would rather have that. We have a closing little prayer, and we'll have enough time, I think, unless we have a lot of chatter now, to say a few Hail Marys to kind of close it, and then we'll close with the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, since that's where we are. Okay, that's your hymn, if I can put it that way. So, Roberta, let's see if we have any hands that go up, or anybody. Maybe you'd like to stand up a little bit, kind of freshen, and we have about 15 or 20 minutes that we can do before we close down for the evening. And I can get a little water. Okay, so we have somebody who has a question or a comment. We don't need just questions.
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but these two letters, epistles, encyclicals, are very powerful resources, but they're already 8 and 6 years old, and you have to go seek them out to find them. How were they received by the Beyond Catholic community? I don't know what the Catholic community did with them, but people in political positions, do they read them? Do they know these kind of documents are around?
Well, I think that out of Laudato Si, I can't say as much maybe for Fratelli Tutti, but out of Laudato Si, a lot of people did get that and took it seriously. So an example would be the Catholic Climate Covenant, okay, which is, it was developed out of the Conference of Bishops, but they have their own separate operation, and there's a lot of young people on this staff. They read the document and they took it to heart, and they're acting on that. And the Laudato Si movement, which is global, run again by young people out of the Vatican, but there are people in all around the world in different countries that really said, I want to be part of that. I want to be active in that. So they have been read. There are too many places that haven't given them attention, okay? But they're still very available. As I mentioned earlier, all you have to do is connect with the Vatican and do your researching in there, and you'll be able to get something, and you can download it. You can take all the documents of Vatican II, for example. You can download it into your computer. You don't have to buy a book, okay? It's all right there. And Fratelli Tutti, the same thing will be available. Does that answer the question?
We as a community of Sisters, Humility of Mary, have been working a lot with young adults, and where we have our villa, which is right over the Youngstown line. We have a farm, and we have done a lot, with the earth. But we find that they're just on fire to do something. They really, really want land justice, and they want us to have a better world. So I think we need to listen to them. They are absolutely incredible.
The young people.
Yeah,
So, yes.
yeah, young adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to say about the Humility of Mary, so Laudato Si came out in 2015, and I'm going to forget the name, but you might be able to remember her. So I had read that, and I studied it, and I actually worked with this Catholic Climate Covenant, because we have little write-ups for every Sunday based on the scriptures of the Sunday that any priest can get from them. They come down a month at a time. That kind of say, here's some ideas for talking about creation, okay, and the state of the climate. And your sister was one of the first. I mean, she was really on that. Do you remember her name? No, I don't think it was an O'Donnell. Might have been. My memory doesn't keep names real easily, but it was one of the Humility of Mary. She was very much into it. She was sick too. She had a lot of health problems, so it is O'Donnell. Okay. See, I don't go for the Irish too fast, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, yes, I think that it has gotten around, okay? There's a priest down in San Diego, priest of diocese. He was down in Central and South America for a long, long time. He's a priest of, I think he's of the diocese there, but it might be that he was a different diocese. But he did a lot of work down in South America and Central America, and he's up there. He's become a champion of climate change and the crisis. And what we need to be doing things. So, and he's getting an award soon, you know, because he went around and got a lot of parishes to get your committee going. And they're doing it, and people make a lot of difference. Another priest was from up in Rochester, and he has a doctor up there who has really got into the climate change and climate crisis kind of thing. So he does all his surgical stuff, but he also has done an awful lot to talk about what we have to do to make the world better. So it has gotten around, but not enough, okay? So, for example, how many of you do something with, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, it took me a while to find out what's this Earth Day thing? You know, how many of you are attentive to Earth Day? Okay, I don't, oh, here, okay, and there, okay, spread the word, you know, do something with others for Earth Day. So it's 53 years old. And people started to see it, that, you know, gosh, something's happened to our Earth. They were aware of that. That was the early 70s. That's 1970, I think, was the first. But it's every year, okay? And then now we have the things I mentioned. We have the season of creation every September, because we teamed up with the Orthodox, because an Orthodox patriarch, he started the whole thing, that, you know, the first of their liturgical year is September 1, okay? So we're going to take care of the climate. And it goes back to one of their patriarchs that goes back into the 1980s, okay? So it's working, but more of us need to get connected with it, I suppose, is what I might want to say. Yes?
I've been an educator in Stark County for over 40 years.
Oh, great.
And I really feel that even in public school I taught, and I'm now teaching here in a private school, I really feel the teachers are doing a good job reaching our children on these, you know, ecology concerns. We teach, you know, natural resources, and we talk about reduce, reuse, recycle. I think, and we have talked about Earth Day. It's one of the things we do all the time. Now I know that, and I remember doing it from almost all of my teaching career, because Earth Day's been around since I've taught.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like, you know, we get the message out, but then where does it go after our children become adults?
Yeah.
I mean, they're all gung-ho, but, you know, that's kind of, but I feel like, you know, we try.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. And I think kids do get into that. I mean, I've heard stories that the kids go home and they say, Mommy, you're not supposed to do that. You know, you have to take better care of this. You know, so I'm delighted to hear you say that. And I think the kids will carry it with themselves. I'm not sure what they do in a high school. Do they do the same thing in a high school? A lot of education?
I believe that, I remember when my son went through the school system that, you know, they had a lot of talk about discussion of climate change. It was a huge topic. Like I said, though, as children become adults, what changes and how can we keep that going? But
yeah, right. Well, I think they carry it with them. But, you know, as they're going out into the larger world now, and so probably it's not an immediate priority for them. They're wherever they're living, you know, mom and dad's house, they're still there, or they're going to an apartment, and, you know, so there may not be that, and they're trying to get a job and go up in a job. But I think it's planted, you know. So this movement that I mentioned, and the Catholic Climate Covenant, it was started by a layman who was working with the Bishops' Conference for a spell, and then he got so taken with that that has become what his whole passion has been as an adult man. But he's got all these young people that are running the operation now. He just raises money to keep it going, you know. But he's very committed to it. So I thank you for that comment. Others? Yes, here we go.
Thank you. You mentioned the Ukraine.
Yes.
And my question is, why hasn't the Vatican condemned the Russian invasion of the Ukraine?
Why Francis hasn't raised hell. That's basically which one? I think there is a diplomatic dimension of the role of the Pope. And the Pope does not want to destroy the possibility of being a force, an element at least, that can contribute to try to resolve that. If it just goes one-sided, it's not going to do. So he's had attention to Russia. He's never been nasty in what he's talking about Russia, but he's very clearly, I would say it's pretty clear he cares mostly about Ukraine, because this Cardinal Cerny that I mentioned, he's a Jesuit. He was from Canada, and he became, an archbishop over there, and he heads that one dicastery that he was down at Georgetown before. He's gone up and back up to Ukraine a couple of times. There's a Polish archbishop in Washington that Francis engaged to really help the people, the poor people in Rome, and he's taken multiple visits up there. They've sent up all kinds of vehicles that can help people to get them out of the war or into the hospital, whatever it is. So I think that Francis is certainly taking care of them. He's not trying to do the same thing for Russia, but he's not simply destroying the possibility that we can get this thing together at some point. Francis doesn't want to do that, and sadly, I think what most everybody who's paying attention to, a big part of what's behind that is the Russian patriarch, who really wants to be running his own show. And he wants nothing, he's standing totally for war. That belongs to us, and we're going to take it, because there was a fight between the Orthodox going on there, so we could get into more of that. Good question. Thank you very much. Yeah, okay, read it off then. Give this man, I think he can speak up. He knows how to talk.
It says, as far as the war of the wide dimensions in Ukraine begun by Russian Federation, the interventions of the Holy Father Francis are clear and unequivocal in condemning it as morally unjust, unacceptable, barbaric, senseless, repugnant, and sacrilegious.
Yeah, those are verbatim, those are his words, right?
Yes.
Yes, I think that does come out, so he's voicing that.
This is August 30th, 2022.
Yeah, I think he's not trying to shut himself out from the possibility of convincing the Russians that this is not a good thing, And he tried to meet with the Russian patriarch a couple of times, and that patriarch kept cutting out on him because he's gung-ho, pro-Putin, and, we've got to fight the fight, so to speak. Yeah. There's cookies and there's drinks out there, thanks to Roberta. So unless there is something else, I think probably we can conclude at this point. If somebody else has a comment, please do. I just have a few final things, and I think our timing, we can get 5 Hail Marys into this. So let me just share a few final thoughts that close on this. So first of all, I thank all of you who took interest in this mission, and I hope that it has enriched you spiritually and your motivation, and hopefully picked up some new ideas, because these are challenging documents that it's based on, but I think it gave you some further exposure to the Bible, from Genesis, to the apocalypse or Revelation at the end, and so forth. I pray that these comments and remarks have strengthened your love for God and for one another as we continue our journey to the well, where Jesus and the Spirit fill us with living water. We will conclude this evening with an ecumenical prayer that comes out of the Fratelli Tutti. I think that's where this came from. And we will say these 5 Hail Marys, and we will be doing the descent of the Holy Spirit, glorious mystery of the Rosary. So I tried to do through all the 4 different packages of mysteries of the Rosary that we've gone through, and I thought this descent of the Holy Spirit it fits us for, hopefully the Spirit, is going to motivate us to continue the work of God and to support Francis. I just want to repeat that again. He, for an 86-year-old man, he's doing one heck of a lot of work, okay? And he's got such a wonderful, positive disposition that I think that it's an example for us, that we need to have that same positive spirit. And, the rosary helps to pour the living water of life into the heart, our hearts and the heart of today's world. So we'll end with your parish prayer of St. Michael the Archangel after we do 5 of the Hail Marys. So the closing prayer that I'm going to read is an ecumenical Christian prayer. And that's another thing that's very important, I think, for us Catholics, to see that we're all in the same boat, And I think we have made a lot of progress, but in my own feeling, I came out of Vatican II, as I was ordained in 1967, and I think because of what happened at the council, I think there was a great enthusiasm about, this division of the Protestants and the Catholics. It's going to be behind us. And I think a lot of progress was made, and a lot of the dialogues are still going of appreciation of one another and reception of one another. But I think it's kind of gone soft, not antagonistic, but I just don't think we're collaborating with one another quite as much. So I think this ecumenical prayer is appropriate. So let us pray. O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of fraternal love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus, in his family of Nazareth, and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in each human being, recognizing him crucified in the sufferings of the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and risen in each brother or sister who makes a new start. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty, reflected in all the peoples of the earth, so that we may discover anew that all are important and all are necessary, different faces of the one humanity that God so loves. Amen. So I thank you for your welcome. I encourage you to not forget Jesus' advice as we all go. And I think something that I didn't accent that I want to add is Fratelli Tutti was very deeply and thoroughly about humanity, the whole of humanity. And some of the key words that I think are always good to have burned into us, when the women went to the cemetery to find Jesus, the angel said, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He's alive." It should always overcome us. And then Jesus collected all of his apostles just by walking down along the shore where they were doing their nets with their fish boats. "Follow me." That's all he said. "Follow me." They got up out of the boat and followed him. That was the end of their fishing. But he said, "I'll make you fishermen, though. Fisher people." Okay? Trust. Trust God. And then what I always like to say at the end of Mass, go forth. Go. Not supposed to be, "Oh, I learned a lot. It's all inside me now." Yes, but go. Share it. Go forth. Glorify the Lord by your life. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who wander about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. So Mary is the queen of earth and heaven, of the universe, really. So we pray 5 Hail Marys, and then we'll go for our refreshments. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. So that ends my contribution here. I want to thank Father Benson for being so kind as to invite me to come down and have the privilege of doing this. It's been enriching for me. I hope it has been enriching for you. And I thank this lady who has helped me through each step along the way. What a marvelous gift you are. So thank you.
Thank you, Father. And first, thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight in community and to make this part of your Lenten journey this year. Thank you. I want to thank the staff, Father Benson, Father Hetzel, and all the staff that helped make this possible, especially Rachel Schumar. She's in the back live streaming last night and tonight. Yeah, she's there. Especially yesterday, she had a long day yesterday facilitating our confirmation retreat for our young church. So thank you, Rachel, for all that you do. And especially Father Bonnot, thank you so much for your time and your energy and helping us with our Lenten journey this year. Thank you for your wisdom and your guidance as we move forward towards Easter. As Father said, we do have some refreshments, so I encourage you to meet in the gathering space. We can continue our conversation and you can talk more with Father. So thank you again.